Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel for this new automotive news roundup. It's March 2026, and today I've got a deep dive into two major stories shaking up the car world. In this video, we're going to start with the main story, the big one. Why is the great electric supercar revolution stalling this badly? We're going to ask the blunt question. If even Ferrari and Porsche are struggling to sell EVs priced in the hundreds of thousands of euros, does the market actually want them? Or did the industry just try way too hard to push, or even force this transition? And then we'll move on to the second topic, more focused but incredibly revealing, Porsche's deep crisis. Between collapsing operating profits, its worst modern financial year, falling sales, especially in China, and even its removal from the DAX, Germany's stock market index, what exactly is going on at Porsche? And what strategies does the company have to get its head back above water? That's what we're going to break down together. If you enjoy this kind of content and want to follow more analyses like this one, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. It really helps me a lot with future videos. Thanks in advance. Alright, let's jump straight into the topic of electric supercars. For years, the auto industry promised us a revolution. Even the most legendary brands, Lamborghini, Porsche, were all supposed to go electric. The supercars of the future were going to be silent, packed with batteries, and capable of smashing 0 to 60 miles per hour faster than ever before. Basically, a Tesla, but at $1 million. On paper, it all sounded perfect. Except today, several signs show that this electric future is arriving much more slowly than expected, especially in the very specific world of supercars and hypercars. And when you look closely at the recent announcements from Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche, and even Bugatti Rimac, one thing becomes pretty clear. These automakers are starting to slow down a bit, and in some cases, pretty significantly. In a previous video, we talked about the first leaked images of Ferrari's new fully electric model, the Luce. Its reveal was even expected around May 2026, but according to several reports, especially from Reuters, the brand's second electric model has now been pushed back until at least 2028. Officially, Ferrari calls it a strategic adjustment. Unofficially, the reasons are a lot simpler. According to internal sources cited in those reports, demand for electric supercars is extremely weak. Big surprise. To sum it up, Ferrari customers still want performance, but they also want an engine. And apparently, the sound of an Italian V12 is still slightly more appealing than a smartphone on wheels. The drive goes even further, suggesting that demand for this electric model is virtually non-existent, which is a bit of a problem when you're planning to sell a car for several $100,000. The Bugatti Rimac case is also especially interesting. Rimac is one of the most advanced automakers in the world when it comes to electric technology. The Nevera is one of the most powerful and fastest cars ever built. But despite those absolutely insane performance figures, the head of the group admitted an unexpected problem. Ultra-wealthy customers aren't necessarily that interested. Why? Because in the world of hypercars, emotion matters almost more than performance. And apparently, a 2,000 horsepower electric motor is still less exciting than an internal combustion engine screaming at 9,000 revolutions per minute. That's just the reality of the market. Over at Lamborghini, the conclusion is pretty similar. In a previous video, we talked about how the Italian brand was originally supposed to launch its first fully electric supercar before the end of the decade. But in the end, that project got pushed back. Lamborghini's first electric model won't arrive before 2029. And the reason given by the company is especially telling. Lamborghini's CEO says the electric supercar market simply isn't ready, which is a pretty logical position for a brand whose identity has always been built around especially expressive V10 and V12 engines. But it's probably Porsche, which we'll talk about later in the video, that best illustrates the current difficulties. For years, the German brand was seen as one of the symbols of the electric transition in the premium automotive segment. The Taycan was presented as the future of electric performance. Except the latest financial results have been a lot less glorious. According to several reports, Porsche has recorded a spectacular drop in profits, especially because of massive investments in EVs. As a result, the automaker has decided to rethink its strategy. Several electric projects have been slowed down or postponed, and Porsche is now focusing more on its most profitable models, internal combustion and hybrid vehicles. So apparently, even in Stuttgart, they sometimes end up rediscovering the virtues of a good old flat six. Some brands have chosen an even simpler strategy. Pagani and Koenigsegg have made it very clear that their customers do not want electric cars. So those manufacturers continue to prioritize combustion engines or hybrid systems. And when we're talking about hypercars sold for between $2 million and $5 million, it's fair to say those customers probably get a say. In reality, the problem with electric supercars is pretty simple. In the world of regular cars, performance is not the main factor. But in the world of supercars, performance is already extreme. And once every car can do 0 to 62 in under 3 seconds, what's left? The sound, the character, the mechanical drama. In short, everything EVs take away. Now, that doesn't mean electric cars are going to disappear. Brands are still working on these technologies, especially to comply with regulations and government mandates as they prepare for the future. But what is changing right now is the pace. The idea that all supercars would become electric within just a few years now seems far less obvious. And automakers are beginning to take a more cautious approach. At the end of the day, this whole situation raises a pretty simple question. If even the most prestigious brands in the world are struggling to sell electric supercars, does the market actually want them? Or did the industry simply try to push EVs too hard? As mentioned earlier, we're now going to take a closer look at Porsche. For years, Porsche was presented as one of the champions of the electric transition in the premium car market. Between the Taycan, the promise of electric sports cars, and the ambitions the brand had laid out for the decade, Porsche seemed fully ready to enter the era of silence and kilowatts. But today, Stuttgart seems to have rediscovered an almost embarrassing truth. Porsche customers still love engines. The numbers released during Porsche's annual press conference were nothing short of brutal. The automaker saw its operating result fall from 5.64 billion euros in 2024 to just 413 million euros in 2025, a drop of more than 92%. At the same time, deliveries declined by around 10% to 279,449 cars, while revenue also fell. For a manufacturer whose reputation was built on some of the highest margins in the industry, the shock is severe. Group revenue fell to 36.27 billion euros, down from 40.08 billion euros in 2024. Operating profit dropped to 413 million euros, and the group's operating margin came in at just 1.1%. The company lowered its forecast several times throughout the year under the weight of 3.9 billion euros in extraordinary charges. Those expenses include around 2.4 billion euros related to the strategic pivot away from electric vehicles, 700 million euros tied to battery operations, and 700 million euros in U.S. tariff-related costs. I'd also encourage you to check out our previous video, linked in the description, where we talked about the outright cancellation of the all-electric Boxster and Cayman. Bottom line, Porsche was removed from Germany's prestigious DAX index after its stock lost more than 30% of its value. A painful symbol for one of the most admired brands in the world. A situation that reminds us that turning passion cars into silent home appliances may not have been the smartest strategy. And yes, EVs, the great promised revolution, the bright future, the applause from ESG investors, and then reality. The job cuts are directly tied to an expensive reversal in strategy. Porsche had promoted a rapid transition toward EVs, but demand turned out to be far lower than expected in key markets, and competition in the EV space intensified. In short, everybody wanted EVs, except the buyers. The CEO publicly admits, "We were wrong." That's not a sentence you hear very often in German automaker press rooms. The good news is that Porsche is now publicly reversing course, extending the life of the combustion engines it had planned to abandon and shelving electric platforms it had spent years developing. The latest press conference confirms that Porsche is recalibrating its electric ramp-up in line with what it describes as a slower EV transition and customer preferences, with projections now significantly below what had originally been planned through 2035. If EVs were the trigger, China was the real source of the problem. Deliveries in China fell by 26% last year, in a luxury segment under heavy pressure from intense local competition, especially in EVs. That situation has been made worse by broader economic concerns and the recent introduction of a luxury tax. Chinese brands are no longer just offering cheaper cars. They are offering premium electric cars, packed with advanced technology right on Porsche's historical home turf. The message is clear. Stuttgart can no longer ignore this reality. Faced with this situation, the Volkswagen Group decided to put a new face in charge. Michael Leiters, whom we already talked about in a previous video, is inheriting a second workforce reduction plan, while his predecessor, Oliver Blume, who remains CEO of Volkswagen, had already negotiated nearly 4,000 job cuts. Leiters presented his Strategy 2035 during this latest press conference just 70 days after taking office. The tone is pragmatic, almost combative. We are fundamentally repositioning Porsche to make the company leaner, faster, and the products even more desirable. The workforce reduction plan targets 3,900 jobs by 2030. Around 2,000 temporary positions have already been eliminated, and more cuts are expected. Management says most of those reductions should happen on a voluntary basis, which, translated from corporate language, means we hope people leave on their own. The keyword of Porsche's new era? Value over volume. Fewer cars sold, but at higher prices and with stronger margins. A model that looks a lot like what Ferrari has been doing for decades, and not without success. Combustion engines will remain at the heart of the lineup alongside electric models, reflecting a broader industry shift as EV demand grows more slowly than governments wanted when they pushed these mandates on the market. The new 911 Turbo S, unveiled in September 2025 with its twin-turbo T-hybrid technology, has become the symbol of this repositioning. It does 0 to 60 miles per hour in just 2.0 seconds, matching the Ferrari SF90 Stradale and even beating the Porsche 918 Spider off the line. The 918, a hypercar that cost nearly €1 million, eaten alive by a production 911. That's what the engineers in Zuffenhausen accomplished while the accountants were busy managing the crisis. And that's where the story takes an exciting turn for enthusiasts. In the middle of all the financial bad news, one announcement electrified, if you'll pardon the expression, the global car community. Michael Leiters said Porsche is evaluating several vehicle concepts in the GT and hypercar segment, and is looking at models and derivatives positioned above its current two-seat sports cars and above the Cayenne. If approved, this new model would sit above the 911 in Porsche's hierarchy, potentially following in the footsteps of the 959, the Carrera GT, and the 918 Spider as Stuttgart's next halo performance car. Porsche hasn't had a true halo car since production of the 918 Spider ended more than a decade ago. The Mission X, an electric hypercar revealed as the vision for the post-918 era, is hovering in the background of this project. But given the lack of enthusiasm for high-end EVs, it's entirely possible that this project could be reworked around a combustion or hybrid powertrain. And for one last bit of irony, I promise, after spending billions planning Porsche's electric future, the brand is now seriously considering building its most ambitious hypercar yet. With a combustion engine, the market has spoken. Stuttgart is finally listening. So, what's next for Porsche in 2026? Porsche is forecasting an operating return on sales of between 5.5% and 7.5% for fiscal year 2026, with estimated revenue between €35 billion and €36 billion. That's a clear improvement from the 1.1% recorded in 2025, but the challenges remain enormous. US tariffs are still in place, pressure in China continues, and the electric sector still requires colossal investments with no guaranteed return. If Porsche, with its margins and brand power, could not make the electric transition work, what does that say about the rest of the auto industry? That may be the most important question raised by this press conference, well beyond the numbers out of Zuffenhausen. In short, Porsche is going through the worst financial period in its modern history, paying dearly for its failed EV bet, deeply restructuring the company, and paradoxically preparing some of its most exciting models in years. The auto industry often works this way. The deepest crises come right before either the most spectacular rebirths or the most brutal collapses. We've reached the end of this video. If you enjoyed the content and want to support the channel, a like would be greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching all the way through, and I'll see you very soon for more analysis.